So, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the discussion on leading others through change. I, Shrishti, would be your host for the discussion today. For today's discussion, our panelist is Mr. Sidharath Tuli, CEO People Sculptors, a certified leadership coach, behavioral skills facilitator, and certified organization development consultant. He has been on the panel of facilitators for Harvard Business Publishing as well as with Aon and DDI. Also, a premium instructor with the global online learning platform Udemy, a master facilitator for change management. He's managing the people side of change for a major digital transformation. Mr. Tuli has worked in leadership positions for major Indian and multinational organizations like Unilever, Reckitt Benckiser, L&T, and Heidelberg Cement. Mr. Tuli has completed his Master of Management Studies from BITS Pilani and the Advanced Management Program from Kellogg Business School. He has a certification in organization development from NTL USA and leadership certification from CFL USA. Welcome to the discussion, Mr. Tuli. We will have the discussion in the first 45 minutes and the last 15 minutes are reserved for the Q&A. The audience can send in their questions through the chat window at any point of the session or the Q&A which is must be there on your screen, and this would be queued for the Q&A at the end. If you would not like to disclose your identity, please do mention along with the question that you wanted to be asked anonymously. We shall begin now.
Right. Thanks, Shrishti, and welcome everybody to this fascinating webinar, which we have titled Leading Others Through Change. So organizational change is a reality and a critical part of organizational life. Every organization is there today because of a multitude of changes. Leading others through change successfully requires thoughtful planning and innovative options. This webinar will provide you with a clearer understanding of what happens to people when an organizational change initiative is initiated in an organization. It will also introduce you to a framework that could be put to use effectively to lead change efforts in your organization. And should you decide to take us as your facilitators to systematically and successfully drive a change initiative, this will provide you with a good understanding of our approach and methodology. So, a quick preamble. It's normally said, change is here to stay, and the only constant in life all around us is change. This change could manifest itself in several forms: embracing a new structure, processes or policies, adopting new technologies, moving operations to a new geographic location, or even completely realigning your product portfolio. The absence of change could lead to organizational obsolescence. Let me just check if, The absence of change could lead to organizational obsolescence and ultimately maybe to its demise. And on the other hand, the implementation of change, if not done properly, could lead to organizational disintegration. Neither of the above scenarios, the death of the organization, the demise of the organization, or its disintegration, is desirable. These options could be avoided, and a seamless change in an organization could be implemented by following some of the guiding principles of change. We shall discuss some of these here. So let's take a quick look at the webinar objectives. The first objective is to quickly define what's meant by the term change. And then we look at why change initiatives fail and what is it that can be done to ensure their success. And then we'll introduce our framework to actively lead change efforts. We'll then make you understand a few techniques that you could apply for increasing and gaining organizational commitment to change. And last but not the least, we'll give you a flavor of our approach to facilitating change. These are the few objectives of this webinar. Okay, so let's take a look at what's meant by the term change. Well, it's a simple definition. I, I, I see change as successfully transitioning an organization towards the desired result. Or when you make a change, you make things different by leading your organization or your group in improving processes or implementing new initiatives. And then, but to do these tasks effectively, you and your team members also need to become different. You can't operate with the same mindset or follow the same established routines and expect different results. Now, this change could manifest itself at various levels. It could manifest itself at an organizational level change. For example, I quite often do a case study of a garment organization where they were changing from a geographical basis. The structure of the organization was changing from a geographical basis to a product line basis. So that was a change which was happening at the organizational level. As a result, at the team level, the supply chain teams became reorganized around products rather than regions. And at the individual level, many employees took on new responsibilities and team assignments. So the next question is, why do change efforts fail? Okay, change fails more than it succeeds. And John Kotter, who's the guru of change management, has said that change fails more than 70% of the time. Now, if these are the stark figures that we've got before us, what is the biggest reason for change efforts to fail? Now, when we talk of change management, we're talking about aligning people. So it is our failure on the people side of change which causes the change to fail. And some of the big causes are maybe the need for the change is unclear. Okay, this happens when people believe that the current way of doing things works well. If the staff have been doing a particular thing for 20 years, then they would want to be in that inertia. For example, as Srishti mentioned, I'm doing a digital transformation. We are, among other things, trying to implement SAP. Now, people are questioning us that, our old way of working is not bad. It's worked fine. Why are you making this change? So our effort has been to make the reason for this change more clear to the organization. The second one is when complacency overcomes urgency. Now look at some of the initiatives that we have planned on our environmental change efforts, but they're moving at a very slow pace. I mean, the common person is not able to appreciate that in a few decades, if things go the way they are going and the emission of gas is happening the way it is happening, then in a few decades, the complete polar ice would melt. Or take another example. Let's say Blockbuster versus Netflix about 10, 12 years back. In 2004, Blockbuster, which is a video rental company, was about $6 billion in revenue. Netflix was an upcoming startup. But Blockbuster, was complacent to a major change in trend. The video rental market was getting disrupted with the live streaming market. Today, Blockbuster is bankrupt and Netflix is much more than $30 billion. The third reason is the resistance is unexpected and mismanaged. Okay, now I have a very beautiful example to this. There are only 3 countries in the world: US, Myanmar, and Liberia, which haven't adopted the metric system. They still use miles and Fahrenheit instead of kilometers and Celsius. Many years ago, the Carter administration wanted to change the metric system and they launched a big initiative. But due to the apathy and huge resistance by the people, this was dropped. Another major reason why change efforts fail is because of limited communication. I was doing a project recently in terms of shifting the server database centers to cloud database centers. Okay, and what happened is that the organization, for some reason, which was undergoing this change, didn't want to inform the database centers that this change would happen. And when we were far into this change, there was a huge resistance from the people because we hadn't taken their views, we hadn't explained them, we hadn't communicated with them why this kind of a change is taking place. Another reason could be lack of commitment. Building, a lot of CEOs talk about, let's say, collaboration, but continue to value individual achievements and individual efforts more than the efforts of the team. So these are some of the reasons that change efforts fail. And let's also look at what helps change efforts succeed. The first factor is a clear vision. For example, in one of the organizations, a fast-moving consumer goods company that I was working in, we had a very clear vision that we want to enhance our gross margins. And that became our vision statement. And that involved a complete change in the supply chain business model. The second one is leadership support and involvement. This clearly is very critical. Wherever I have done change, I keep on telling the top leadership team that without your involvement, this change is not going to happen. In a recent case of a digital transformation, there are 2 organizations in which the same change is happening, but in one of the units, the leadership has played a very active role, and we can see very clearly that the acceptance of change in that organization is far higher than the second organization where the leadership support is missing or far less. The third reason could be employee contribution and employee buy-in. Making, for example, in a plant that I used to work earlier, we wanted workers to multitask, to look at maintenance, to look at operation. Even before starting the line, we communicated with them. We explained to them why we need them to multitask, because if while running a machine, there's a small breakdown, they should be able to attend it on their own rather than depending upon a shop floor mechanic to come and fix it. Okay, and similarly, accountability is very key, and alignment, and lastly, the alignment with organizational goals and values. Again, the case study of the garment, which I referred and alluded earlier, in this organization, the goal was, or the mission of the organization was, to provide better customer service, and the entire restructuring of the product on product lines instead of geographical lines was done in alignment with the organizational goal of providing excellent customer service to its clients. All right, so we've looked at what are the factors which obstruct change, What are the factors which help change? And then, of course, the last factor which I skipped was excellent communication. As we are doing in a digital transformation, our current experience is the more you communicate, the more posters you have, the more videos you have, the better is a chance of change being accepted. I wanted to take a look at I wanted to give you a chance to say what you have to say and take a short break. I wanted to ask if you could mention a score from between 1 to 10, 1 being the lowest and 10 being the highest, that you would give to your organization on a scale of 1 to 10 on a change initiative which you may have launched now or sometime in the past. And if you could mention what is the biggest scope of improvement. You could use the chat box. You could use the chat box to mention what is the biggest scope of improvement. Could we have 1 or 2 feedback, please, on the score that you would give to your organization? I've opened the chat box, and this is to all panelists and attendees. Would anybody want to mention a score? Okay, you can think about it. I'll go ahead and talk about the change management framework. Okay, we call this ACT or ACT. This is the model that we adopt for uh, for leading your organization or facilitating your organization towards change. Uh, A stand for the acronym ACT. A in ACT stands for activating the change. C stands for creating a plan, and T stands for transitioning the change. We will look at each of these in a bit of more detail as we go forward in the session. So let's first take a look at activating the change, which as I said, have these 4 things: clarifying the vision and goals, determining readiness, establishing a sense of urgency, and establishing a communication plan. So this is, let's take a look at each one of them one by one. The first one in activating the change is clarifying and aligning the vision and the goals of the organization. A clear vision helps employees understand the purpose and advantages of a change effort. For example, when we said in the FMCG company, enhancing gross margins by relocating manufacturing plants from metros to greenfield, that was our vision, which then went on to change our supply chain model. So that was the vision we used to launch all the initiatives in the organization. And then a vision helps you to be supportive of the ultimate goal. A very good example is the launch of GST, which the vision behind GST, Goods and Services Act, Goods and Services Taxation, is to create a unified Indian market for the goods and services produced in the country. So that's the first point. The second one is equally critical, which is determining readiness. which is to say, how do we take the organizational temperature? How do we identify the hurdles to success? How do we talk to people at all levels? Now, when we are doing our real life facilitation with organizations, this becomes very critical. This is very structured. We have tools to measure the stakeholder commitment. We have tools to measure the change readiness of the average user, of the average employee in the organization, and then we analyze it. But this is very important to understand where the organization is, and we try and talk to people at all levels. And don't forget that you would expect pushback. Okay, and then the third point is establishing a sense of urgency. According to the guru, John Cotter, he mentions that establishing a sense of urgency is the most critical step. How do you spark a sense of urgency, heightened energy and motivation about the change, and reduce fear and complacency? You speak to dissatisfied customers, you look at trends, for example, in the market, like people preferring to use car hailing applications, and then you present this kind of a picture which you have received from dissatisfied customers, from your clients, and say that this is what feedback we have got. If we don't look at it, we are in severe danger of losing our market share, of losing our profitability. And at times you do create a slightly exaggerated picture to get everybody to understand the sense of urgency. A clear case, if I look at the country, is the liberalization process kicked off in 1991, which was a result of the country's bankruptcy when our back was against the wall. And in that scenario, a slew of new initiatives were launched because we completely run out of options and choices. And then the last thing in the activating change piece is to create a communication plan. And good communication is important to hasten the change process. Communication is important in building a critical mass of support and increasing the number of people who will support the change. Communication could be both giving information and gathering information. So to deliver the information, you could use emails, newsletters, have conversation with your employees. To gather information, you could use focus groups, questionnaires, one-to-one meeting, even social media. So you could opt for a range of options to gather information from your people and to deliver information. So these are the four things that you can do to activate change. Let's now look at what is it that you can do to create a plan, which is the C part of it. And there are three elements to it: gathering and analyzing data, involving and engaging others, and a plan to manage resistance. Let's take a look at each one of them. The first one is gathering and analyzing data. Why do we need data? Data can help us identify lessons, learn from past change efforts that could make this change effort easier and more effective. For example, when I was doing the digital transformation, we took other organizations which had other government organizations in the petroleum sector, in the posts, in the railways, which had successfully implemented change, and also we kind of tried to learn from their experience that what were the setbacks that they faced, what were the hurdles that they faced. So data helps us identify lessons learned from the past change efforts, either of your organization or other similar organizations. It also helps determine the level of support that the effort will have and from where. It will also help clarify who will be affected by the change and how much. It can also provide an estimate of the resources required for a successful change effort. And then lastly, it helps you assess the to be and as is, the strategic gap between where the organization is now and where it wants to be later. And then you need to know, how do you collect data? There are numerous ways to collect data for your change effort. Some of the examples are focus groups, surveys and questionnaires, observation, SWOT analysis, etc. So this is the first piece in terms of the creating a plan. And the second one, which comes right in the middle, and the very, very, very important. If left unattended, as we have seen in earlier slides, this could completely derail your change management process. So dealing with resistance is an important part of a change initiative. You need to view resistance to change as an opportunity, not an obstacle, by encouraging open communication and listening carefully to team members' concerns. You may uncover information that you were unaware of and surface ways to improve the change effort. When people feel that they have been heard and have had a chance to discuss problems and suggest solutions, they're more likely to support the initiative. Instead of viewing resistors as impediments, recognize that their opposition is a kind of energy you may be able to redirect in a positive way. To make good use of resistance, uncover what's motivating the resistance. And secondly, use resistors' valid concerns to generate ideas for improving the change effort. And lastly, try and engage your resistors in the planning and implementation process to make them part of the solution. See if you can use a resistor, one of your critical resistors, to drive the change management process. Okay? And lastly, in this point, keep in mind that most people, even those who thrive on novelty and change, find change to their routines stressful. The most vocal resistors may be expressing discomfort that others on your team are feeling but are reluctant to express. And then let's look at the third piece in creating a plan is to involve, engage, and motivating others. In this piece, in terms of involving and engaging, you try and deliver your training programs. Now, you can discuss the format of training, and that could vary depending upon the context of the organization. It could be a webinar, it could be a classroom, it could be a virtual training session, and we have tried with various formats depending upon the context of change. But training people in new skills is very important part of creating a plan. And the last part of change is to transition the change. It's to design the implementation, institutionalize the change, and evaluate the effort. What we are trying to do in terms of designing the changes is to review current information, creating a checklist, ensuring that the communication is happening, and at times, if need be, refining the communication plan, and very importantly, ensuring that there are or planning for a few quick wins. That gives the momentum to the change effort. And then a very important part of this is the RASI matrix, which is fixing the responsibility of the people. Who is the one who will take responsibility, ensure that a task gets done? Who's the person who's accountable? A is for accountability. Who takes ownership? Who approves the work provided by the person who's responsible? And C stands for consulting, which is person who signs off major decisions. And I stands for informing individuals who need to be informed but not consulted. And then the next step is institutionalizing the change, making the change stick and becoming a lasting part of the culture. Change needs constant attention, anchoring new approaches in the culture, rewarding desired behavior and maybe penalizing wrong behavior. And what works here excellently, very well, is seeding in the HR processes, the recruitment, the selection, the promotion, the appraisals. How do we recruit people for the new competencies? Okay, how do we promote people for the new visible competencies? How do we appraise people? How do we put in KPIs, new KPIs, the change KPIs in our performance management system? All these help. All these are very useful and helpful in institutionalizing the change, in ensuring that the change sticks. And then the last piece of our framework is evaluation in terms of impact, in terms of process, in terms of leadership. In terms of impact is, did we do what we said we wanted to do? In terms of process, how well did we do what we did? And how well did the leadership do? You are evaluating all three aspects, but the leadership aspect is very critical. I keep on saying this again and again, that in any change effort, in times of change, leadership is required the most. Change, very often, organizations are overmanaged and underled. Without a committed leadership, change will not take place. It's unlikely. My experience tells me that wherever the leadership is active, that it's easier for the transition to happen smoothly. Wherever there is a dearth of leadership, wherever leadership is missing, we notice that the change effort isn't meeting or would not meet the organizational objectives. I can't talk more about it because of paucity of time, but in my mind, the exercise of leadership is most critical in making a change effort succeed. In my last slide, I just want to discuss how we as an organization add value. If you were to engage us, how do we add value to in facilitating change? As Srishti mentioned in the beginning, we are organizational development experts. Okay, we are OD experts. We understand the concepts, the theory behind change management. Okay, we have experience in facilitating the people side of change. We're doing a very complex digital transformation. We've now taken a new assignment in terms of building capability in the organization so that the execution capability of the organization increases, because one of the critical success factors of the organization is its execution capability. We have a well-established framework, process, templates, and instruments. Now, this is a point that I want to highlight very clearly, is that change management is a very structured process. For example, in one of the digital transformations that we are doing for the government, we are using as many as 56 templates. It's very structure heavy. We try and update those templates on a regular basis. So a change management effort needs to be supported by a secretarial office which can do the process work of managing change, and we will guard against the process being derailed, and we won't allow that. And we have the courage. We possess the courage to call out issues or flag issues that may not be so obvious in the organization and need attention, so that the whole change management process can be brought back on track. I'll stop here, and in brief, I have tried to cover what is change management. I have tried to explain why change management efforts fail. I've also tried to explain what makes change efforts succeed. And then I have presented a framework of change management, and I've taken you through all the elements of the change management framework. And my last slide was the kind of approach that we adopt in ensuring that the change management, what is our approach to facilitating change in any organization that we take up. I'll now open for any questions that may be there, and I'll be very happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Tuli, for your insights. So we do have received a question. So if somebody has asked anonymously, so what is the most effective way of communication when informing about the change?
Okay, interesting. Okay, so if I do not know what is the context of change in this organization. Okay, so but there are, as I showed in my slide, there are various ways that you can communicate, and I sometimes use a beautiful quotation that change management is 99% perspiration and 1% inspiration. Okay, the inspiration is the vision, but the perspiration is the communication. So you need to communicate. You need to have a change management charter. You need to have an elevator pitch. What is changing? What is not changing? What is the scope? When will we do it? Who will do it? So have these kind of these pitches made. We have we in the digital transformation that we are doing, we made videos. We made 55-second, 56-second videos to tell people about briefly about what's changing. We issued a communication from the senior management, top management, about the change management charter, that this is the change, why we are doing it. It will help you decision making. It will have a single source of truth, etc., etc. Who's involved in this change? What are the timelines? What is changing? What is not changing? How will you know that the things have changed? So we used that kind of a thing, and then we supplemented it with workshops where we invited people to express their views. We made presentation on similar lines, and we talked about the need for the change. We talked about how other organizations. We showed them case studies of how other organizations have changed, and we then communicated with them. And then with critical stakeholders, we also had one-to-one meetings. We talked to them and asked them what is their concern, and we tried to engage them. So you can be creative about communicating change, but these are some of the tools that you would use. You could use a webinar if you are in one site and you want to communicate with the other people. You could use a webinar announcing, for example, if a change management about restructuring, you would certainly want, the chief executive may want to announce that we are now restructuring the organization on these lines, and this is the change that is being envisaged. This is what is going to happen. This is how we are going to support you. This is the timeline, etc., etc.
Okay, thank you. There is one more question. So you talked about the digital transformation and lately whatever the experiences that you have been having. So could you share your key learnings during of your current experience of these developing changes in this complex digital environment?
Okay, thanks, Srishti. I think it's a very valuable, very interesting question. See, when I see in US or in developed markets, I see that many of these digital transformations, many of the major change efforts today are being supported by a change management team. Okay, earlier it was assumed, for example, if you are changing a structure or you're reorganizing the organization or you're undergoing a major digital transformation, earlier it was assumed that the team which was doing this kind of a change, people would align to these changes automatically. But that doesn't happen. If you are changing to a cloud storage from a physical storage, it's a major change. You need to communicate to people earlier, and that is the reason why in some of the earlier organizations, change to, let's say, the cloud server model took such a long time, and even after a long time it wasn't stabilized. So what I see it's early days, but I see a trend in our country where along with the technical team, another project is given out to people like us, to OD experts, to to facilitate the people side of change so that you can stabilize the change. So that's a new trend which is coming and which is in line with what has already been happening, and it will happen. It will stabilize in our country pretty soon. So that's the first point. But having gone the assignment and having done change management, I only want to say is that the change management facilitators need to be brought in early, right from day one. Okay, you don't have to bring them when you are about to close the project and talk to people. You have to bring them when you are planning the change, when you are thinking about the change. So bring them at an early stage, involve them, give them a frontline seat, make them a critical part of the steering committee, make them a critical part of the core team, and then the third thing which I want to say is that the leadership has to play a very, very active role. The people should see a visible change from the side of leadership. People should see their leadership embracing change. If people get a sense that this change is coming from somewhere else and the leadership is not entrenched in it, the leadership is not bought into the change, you can rest assured that that change management effort is very highly likely to get derailed.
Okay. So we have one more
And
question.
one
Yes,
more
sir.
point
Yeah,
is
please.
that it needs to be supported with the process, with the structure. Okay, so you need to have your templates of change readiness, stakeholder awareness. Okay, all these templates to monitor the progress of change, a well laid out change management plan. So that process, the templates, is the fifth important thing that needs to be implemented in the change management effort. Thank you.
Okay. So there is one more question. What is the typical timeline to start measuring the impact of the change? This is related to implementing a new software for the day-to-day processes.
Could you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, please. I'll do that. What is the typical timeline to
Ah,
start measuring the
impact of
impact of the change? Yeah, in specifically when it comes to implementation of a new software for the processes.
okay, so in my experience, we are doing a very complex digital transformation, and there are many parts to it. One of the part is introduction of the SAP system. Okay, so this project has been divided into three waves: wave one, wave two, wave three, depending upon the time, depending upon the criticality of the module of the SAP module. For example, they were they were the first in the first module. They included the HR piece. So because they said let people start getting used to a system, let people start so applying for leave. Okay, their travel bills are getting settled online. They go apply for medical leave, vacation online. All these things start happening in the HR module online. The people start getting nominated online. So the first module to get implemented was in wave one, and then slowly the project management, the finance, the procurement was staggered in wave two and wave three. So this entire thing is taking about 18 to 20 months. So depending upon the complexity of the software, you will have your own timeline, but you need to factor in the scope of what you have. If you have only a HRIS or HRMS system to be implemented, I would say 3 to 4 months is more than enough. Is more than enough. But if you are linking it, there are a lot of people who are involved, and you have a massive organization with multiple spread out units, then you need to factor out the time, and that will come when you draw out your plan, when you draw out your milestones, when you draw out your deliverables. All this will become clear to you at that stage as how much time it would take. In the absence of any other data, I will not. I'm finding it difficult to hazard a guess, but you can go back and see the steps involved and do it. And the change management team will work along with you, okay, based on the timelines that you have got. They won't need any additional time.
All right. So with this, we would end our discussion as I think we do not have any any other open questions. But still, if somebody has any more questions related to this, please drop us a mail and then we will take it forward. Thank you everyone for joining us on this discussion, and we look forward to see you again. We would like to thank Mr. Sidharath Tuli for a profound
Thank
session.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.